to welcome you to the Tennessee State Lectureship. I just so appreciative for the opportunity to serve you. I'm thankful to Brother Hayes and the Tennessee Lectureship Committee for allowing me the opportunity to, especially this topic. I think this is a very crucial topic. How do men heal? That's an important topic because it implies when we look at how men heal, it implies that men are wounded, that men hurt, that there are some challenges with men. And that's something that oftentimes we don't like to deal with, we don't want to talk about, is men hurting. As men, we have not been socialized to talk about our hurts. We're not socialized to talk about our pain, our emotional part. We're taught to stay away from that, except for anger. We are allowed to be angry because, anger kind of feeds into our manhood. It feeds into our masculinity. So we're allowed to be angry. But we're not allowed to be afraid. Those kind of emotions that we're not allowed to be. But here's what's interesting and what's fascinating about it all. We may not be allowed to be that, but we are afraid. We do become afraid. So talking about this topic of how men heal, the implication is so important. The what it brings to the table is so important. How men heal. So I want to look at this from Psalms 51. I think David gives us some clear insight into how men heal. I really do. I think, first of all, there's some things that takes place with David that we'll see here in Psalms 51 that I think that I believe is important. And I think that we will be able to take some things away from Psalms 51 that will help us as men, but not only just help us as men, but will help our significant others, our women, the sisters, the wives, to understand better about men and their insight to how we heal. How do we heal the pain that's inside of us? How do we heal the trauma that's inside of us? So, and when we look at Psalms 51, the first thing I like to deal with, there'll be four. I'll talk about the reasons, the recognition, the response, and the renewal. The reasons, the recognition, the response, and the renewal. So when we look at Psalms 51, we realize that what David had done there with Bathsheba. We realize the killing of her husband. We realize, what had happened with Uriah. So first thing when we start talking about how men heal, we have to look at the reason behind the hurt, the reason behind the trauma. The reason becomes important because if we don't look at the reason, then it's hard to get to recognition. So let's talk about the reason. Why, what is it that caused men to hurt? Well, very early, men began to deal with problems and challenges that are really significant and very, very, very early in life. And we're talking about the times in life when the little boy's growing up. Perhaps that little boy, the reason for that little boy's hurt is that he didn't have a father. There was really no role model in his life. There was no one that was there to be that role model, to show him what it was like or what it's like to be a man. For him to observe, for him to absorb from a strong spiritual man what it's like to love his mother. Or if there were other children, what it's like to be a strong father, what it's like to be a strong spouse. Sometimes that's just not there. That's just not there. And that leaves a type of traumatic experience for young boys. There's no father. There's no father figure. There's no one there that they can look at, that can set that example in their lives, that they can say, I want to be like my daddy. There's no one there that can be the example of a father going and he's watching his father take care of his mother, buying her gifts, Valentine's Day, being supportive, holding and hugging. He doesn't know. He hasn't seen that. Or perhaps if a father was in the house, perhaps the father was an alcoholic, or the father was abusive. So that within itself developed trauma for the little boy growing up. When we look at ACE children, adverse childhood experiences of children, oftentimes young boys, fathers in jail, they experience that. They experience death of a loved one, the loss of things. A lot of significant experiences can go to the reason why the hurt is there from the start. So the reason becomes significant. The reason becomes significant. And you know, David in Psalms 51, he understood the reason for his hurt. You know, if we as men, if we don't talk about our hurt, if we don't talk about the reason that we're hurting, if we don't talk about the abuse that we experienced in our lives, if we don't talk about the things that we observed, you know, perhaps we observed daddy being abusive to mom, or we observed mom, dad was not there, or dad was not in the picture, but mom had boyfriends in and out of the house. If we don't talk about the reason of the hurt, we can't get into the recognition of what needs to be done. You know, it's almost like it's a quiet thing. I can't talk about, you know, why I'm hurting. I can't talk about the pain that's down inside, that's deeply rooted inside of me. Yeah. So not only did I observe, what did I have to do as a little boy? Did I have to steal? For the family did I have to go down and steal bread for the family to have food? You never know what children. It's amazing in sessions when you begin to do genograms and when you begin to listen to stories of what young men had to do. Some of them had to steal for their family to have food on the table. Some of them had to work very early in life. So what did they have to do? You know, some of them had to break up fights between mommy and daddy. Some of them had to pull men off their mothers. I mean, and once we begin to understand the reason behind it, once we begin to talk about the reasons for our hurt, then we can understand better how to heal. But if we don't talk about what I had to do, if we don't talk about what I saw, if we don't talk about that, if we don't talk about, you know, what happened to me, there are a lot of young boys that have been abused, not only emotionally but sexually. A lot of things have happened to a lot of little boys. So they grow up. And when we grow up, we carry those childhood experiences with us. We don't all of a sudden drop them. We carry those experiences with us. And those traumatic experiences, we can't deal with them at that age. Let's just say that I, as a young boy growing up at 8 years old, let's say I could take 50 pounds of trauma in my life, 50 pounds of trauma, but I experienced 100 pounds of trauma by the things that I've observed, the things that I had to do, and the things that happened to me. It was just so overwhelming. So what do I do with all of that? I suppress it. And it becomes part of what we call intrinsic memories. You know, extrinsic memories are those memories that come quickly, we can recall, you know, like your birthday. You know, it's, oh, I know when my birthday is. You know, possibly where you live. I know where I live. You know? I know what car I drive. I know this. I know it's just things that we can recall quickly. But it's those traumatic intrinsic memories that's part of the reason why we hurt, part of the reason why we need to be healed. And they show up not as memories, but oftentimes they show up as depression. Wow. Depression is running rampant in the lives of men, especially African American men. It shows up as anger. It shows up as sadness. It shows up as not feeling valued. It shows up as not knowing where I fit in. Listen to David. The reason. David said, "Be gracious to me, God." In other words, I've done treason here, and I don't even deserve it. I don't deserve it. So it starts by, after we look at the reason, we kind of look at it. I don't deserve, God, whatever it is that happened, I don't deserve. He says, be gracious unto me according to your steadfast love. I know that you still love me. Well, that's important. That's part of the healing. I know that you still love me because I know that you're just full of this compassion, and that's what I need. That's what we as men need. We just need to be loved, and we need compassion. And David is going down that road. Love, compassion. I need you, Father. I need that because of, and that's where we are. God, I need you because of things that I've had to do. I was young growing up. Even when I got older, I've made some choices that are not good. So basically, once again, it goes back to those three things, God, that I really need help with. I need help on things that I've observed in life, things I had to do in life, and things that happened to me in life. Father, I need your mercy. I need your compassion. So this healing is not out here. This healing starts inwardly. That's where the healing starts. The healing starts inwardly, and from inwardly, I began to heal because of a connection that I have with God. And that healing begins with ultimately knowing my reasons. And not just knowing the reasons, but secondly, I have to recognize. That I need to have recognition of the hurt. That, it's the hurt do exist. Are you hurting? Yes, I'm hurting. I know the reasons, but I am hurting. I'm hurting. And oftentimes as men, as I stated, we're not really allowed to talk about our hurt. I don't talk about recognition of it. I mean, we're not recognizing, no, I'm not hurt. We as men can't hurt. We've been socialized, we can't hurt. Well, listen, just because I don't think I can hurt does not take away the hurt. I'm still hurting. Just because I think I'm too manly to be depressed does not stop the depression. Just because I think I'm too manly to be sad does not stop the sadness. It's there. But it's there and it can be healed. But the healing can never be brought out through denial. And when I talk about our families, we're not fault finding, we're fact finding. That's what we're doing. We're not trying to blame anyone. We talk about that a lot, blaming of people. You blame this person and blame that. Well, we're not trying to blame anybody. We're not fault finding. Trust me, we're fact finding. We're finding the facts. We're looking at facts and say, hey, here are the facts. I was abused as a child. I came up in poverty. Mom was an alcoholic. She was an alcoholic. Daddy was a womanizer. He was a womanizer. Daddy was in jail. He was in jail. Daddy was killed in a gang accident. He was killed in a gang accident. My daddy didn't think very much of me. He didn't think very much of me. My daddy told me all the time how I was no good and never amount to anything. If he said it, he said it. I cannot heal unless I admit to what's being said. And the beauty of Psalms 51 is that David admits to what was going on in his life and what had done and what had happened in his life. He admitted to it. I know that's hard. But we can't heal unless we are humbled and we begin to, look at reasons and we begin to recognize it. That becomes really, really important. It's part of who we are and what we're all about. So David pleads mercy according to God's love kindness. He implores forgiveness according to God's tender mercies. And then he goes on in verse 2. He begs washing and cleanses of his sin. And that washing and cleansing is like some old filthy clothes. He just said, David is saying, Lord, just wash it. Just keep washing it. Just keep washing it. Just keep washing it. In other words, David understands that what that this sin is, and what has happened in his life is no easy task. It's not an easy task to heal. It's just not. We're not talking about an easy task. We're talking about a recognition of, how this is really hard. This is, these things have really happened in my life. These things are really challenging in my life. So as men, it's hard. It's tough. It's very challenging. I've spent the last decade plus 2 years serving in our military personnel, embedded with infantry and special forces. And it's hard. It's very challenging, because part of survival for men at times is to be in denial. And I get it. But at times we get to the point that growth needs to take place. And growth doesn't take place in the state of denial. It's kind of like there are just certain parts of Florida that you're not going to have really good apples. That's just not going to happen. The weather's not conducive to it. But you're going to have some good oranges, but the weather's not conducive to really good apples. So the state of denial is just really not good for our healing. The state of denial is just not good for our being the fathers that we need to be, the husbands that we need to be, the men of God that we need to be. The state of denial is not conducive to the growth thereof. So we have to get out of the state of denial. And I think that's what happened with David. If you notice in verses 3 through 4, he confesses his sinful conduct. That's more of the recognition. He's confessing. He's truthful. He admits his sin, which is ever before him. He admits to it. My sin is right there in front of me. He confesses that he has sinned against God and done evil in his sight. He's dealing with what really is. He's recognizing the real here. God is just and blameless in judging. He realizes I deal with a just God, a God that's blameless in judging. Yeah. He understands that. See, that's that part of that recognition. It's hard to admit the faultiness of our family system. It's hard to admit to it. I get it. It really is. We all want to come from this perfect family that no one comes from. This perfect family that does not exist. And for the most part, we all want to have perfect parents that they don't exist either. So we all want this. But it's just a fantasy. It's a dream world. And once again, healing can't take place in that state. It cannot take place there. Healing can't take place. Growth can't take place. Spiritual growth can't take place. And that's why I said at the beginning, the reason that I really like this topic is that it implies that we're hurting. It implies that there's some traumatic experiences that we've had. It implies that there's some things that have happened to us that's not good. There's some things that we've done in life, not good. There's some things that we have observed, not good. So we understand that all these things happen. This is where David is. This is where David is. So we looked at reasons. There are reasons why we do what we do. Absolutely. Absolutely. We're talking about reasons. Once again, we're not dealing with excuses. We're not talking about excuses. Well, that's excuse. No, we're not talking about excuses. I'm not talking about faults, and I'm not talking about excuses. I'm not blaming anyone, and I'm not excusing. But there are things I'm doing. I'm fact-finding, and I'm looking at reasons. And I think that's what made David be so open here in the first few verses. It's because he knew reasons. Yes, reasons, and he dealt with the facts. Yeah. And that's hard. That's difficult at times. I get it. Sure it is. And then in verses 5 and 6, he goes on in his acknowledgement of God's desire. He says, but God, I realize where the standard is. Yeah, that's when we began to respond, all right? That's when we begin to respond to the hurt. When I begin to respond to my hurt, I've got to realize where the standard is. Just because I didn't see the standard of manhood, I don't need that standard. I really don't. He recognizes, and we'll look here in verses 5 and 6. He recognizes where the standard is. Sometimes, perhaps, in our lives as men, the father was not the standard. I get it. Perhaps father was in jail, ended up in prison. I get it. Perhaps he was emotionally detached. I get it. Perhaps he didn't love mom and he didn't treat her right. I get that too. I get all of that. Absolutely. Perhaps he wasn't the standard. Perhaps the uncle that I've observed was not the standard. Or the older brother that I admired and later on found out that he was doing some unethical stuff. It's not the standard. And see, what happens is that when we put the wrong standard in place, and when imperfection becomes the standard, it impairs my healing. Yeah. Parents didn't parent me right all the time. Sometimes they did it for their own good and benefit, the Hebrew writer says. So, parents not the standard. But David realized where the standard was. He realized who was the standard. And he expressed his sinfulness and he acknowledged God's desire. He says he was brought forth in this crazy state, the state of sin. When we were born, sin was all around us when we were born. It's everywhere. Sin is everywhere. Yes. He says in my mother's conception of it, there was sin. I was born, there was sin. But he says, God, I know what you want. It's just not the standard. The sin is not the standard. The wrong is not the standard. Things that traumatize me, it's just not the standard. Things that hurt me a lot of times, it's just not the standard. So his response to it all, his reaction to it all is, God is the standard. He said God wants truth in the inward parts. He said God's wills to make him known wisdom in hidden parts. He says God sets the standard. And when I fail, it's because the standards of God was not met. When I was hurt from wrongdoings, it was because the standard of God was not met. And when I had to do things, when I did things that were not right, it was because the standard of God was not met. When things were done to me that were erroneous, things that were not right, things that were rude or cruel to me, when those things happened to me, the standards of God were not met. Things that I did, things that were done to me, things that I observed, those things that have affected me. And this world is a fallen society. We all get bit. There's sin all around us. There was sin in our homes. The standard of God is what I look for, David said. I need to look for this standard of God. That's his response. How does a man heal? It starts inwardly. It starts with, there's a reason. I don't want to make excuses. We're not making excuses. There are reasons for it. Absolutely. There's a recognition that it happened. And it happened because in response to it, I got to understand that the standards of God is not being met. So I've got to put the standards of God in my life. That has to be the standard. I can't lower those standards. And when I don't fulfill those standards, I need once again go back and say, hey, what's the reason for this? Was it my selfish pride? Was it I want to do what I want to do? in a recognition of that. So we go back to the part, once again, of the pattern to find out exactly what's going on in my life. That I need to continuously heal once again. Reasons, recognition, response. In verses 7 through 12, his prayer for forgiveness and restoration, he's responding to this reaction because now he's moving toward a renewal of the hurt. I renew the hurt. The renewal of it all. I don't have to stay in this predicament. I don't have to stay in this situation. Yes. I can actually, because I am made in the image of God and because of how neurologically I'm developed, I can actually think about what I'm thinking about before I respond. And he goes on, his prayer for forgiveness and restoration in verses 7 through 12. We see him praying he prays for forgiveness, for God to purge him. He said, God, purge me, wash me, hide my face. Hide his face from his sins, blot out all iniquities. God, I can't, he realized his limitations. I cannot do it. And you think about it, we as men, we've been taught that we do it on our own. I oftentimes when I'm counseling men, and we have this this socialization going on that as a man I need to do it on my own. I need to be able to accomplish everything on my own. I don't need any help. Well, and I always ask them, some of the most successful people in the world, they have help. It's not that you do it wrong all the time, but sometimes we need a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach. Yeah, all athletes, you think about having a coach. People who are in the entertainment world, guess what they have? Coach. They have coaches. Yeah. They have somebody to say, yeah, that's good, but let's see, can we do it a little better? Yeah. We always need, somebody to say, hey, let's, you don't have to take this journey by yourself. And I thank God for the church that, one of the group, the powerful thinking with groups is that you don't have to take this journey by yourself. That there's someone there to help you in that journey. And there's no shame in that. There's no embarrassment in that. And that's why God has the church for, men and women and children, boys and girls to come together, and they pool themselves together for a journey. Realize and understanding they don't have to do this by themselves. Please, man, we don't have to do this. We don't have to take the journey by ourselves. We don't have to make all these decisions and all these choices and carry all this burden around by ourselves. We can be like David, just get real with it. Just reason, recognition, respond to it, and then start working toward renewal. He said, purge me with hyssop that I may be clean. Wash him that he may be whiter than snow. You doing this, God. He said, hide his face from his sins. Blot out all my iniquities. Help me, Father. Help me. He prays for restorations, for God to make him hear joy and gladness. Make me hear joy and gladness. Make my broken bones rejoice, he says. Make my broken bones rejoice. Create in him a clean spirit. Renew a steadfast spirit in him. This is a man that has been wounded. He needs help. He says, not cast him away from his presence. Please don't do that. Don't take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore me the joy of my salvation, of his salvation. Uphold him in his generous spirit. Renew me. Why? You get to the point of, why? Why the renewal? Why the renewal? Because I need a better operational system. A better operational system. And it's more than just neurological. It's more than just that. It's my DNA. I need God to help me with my operational system. Not just with my thinking. Not just with my feelings. Not just with my behaviors. Yes, I definitely need that. But God, I want you to go deeper. Seems like David is saying, I need an overhaul. I want you to go in. There's something not right about my entire operational system. Wow. It's kind of like there's so many of our men who are suffering. They're suffering from all different kinds of things. And they hurt other people. One that's very familiar with it, and I want to talk just a moment about it, is when we're dealing with operational system, it seems like there's just so many narcissistic men. We call them cluster B in the personality disorder. Cluster A, cluster B, cluster C. Well, these cluster Bs are just notorious for just hurting people. Have hard times attaching in relationships. And what seems to spring out when some don't really work with themselves is this narcissistic entity that's all about them. It's all about them. It's everything that they want. And so when we don't allow God to come in and begin to rearrange our operational system, it can become so much about us that we go out and we seek people not to love them, but we seek people for them to play a role in our lives that we need them to play for us to stay safe. So we seek a woman that will do everything that we ask her to do to stay safe. Yeah, whole operational system messed up. We need children to play certain roles to make us, especially when you're dealing with narcissistic personality, because image is so important. We need this image so badly. So it's not about loving anybody, it's about maintaining an image. So I need my children to walk in a straight line, not because I love them and not really because I want them to be godly children, but I need them so people will say how good I am. That's messed up. That's because my operational system is off. And that's because I'm not being like David, asking God to come in, man, just clean this operational system out and renew it with his godliness and his spirit. So I want my children to be godly, not just about an image. So people say, you know, that Ben Roberts got his children in line. Oh, he's the head of his house. But when he gets home, he's rude to them. He's cruel to them. And they actually control more about fear than they are about love. That's what happens when we don't do it right. We create another generation of messiness because we refuse to look at reasons. We refuse to look at recognition. We refuse to respond properly. And we refuse to be renewed. And I like what David said. He says, Lord, why? Why? Why should he do it? Well, here it is. So he can be a servant for him. So I can be a better servant. So I can be a better husband. So I can be a better employee. I can be a better father. How do I heal? I heal from the inside out. I heal by looking at the reasons why I'm this way and recognizing that I need to do something about it. Yeah. I heal by responding to God and asking him to redo this whole operational system that's corrupt. It can look like a lamb. It can look like Christianity, But when you look closely, you see a dragon. You see a personality disorder. You see unhappy children. You see unhappy spouses. He says, verses 13 through 17. He said, he will teach transgressors the ways of God. Then I can do that. I can teach sinners so they will be converted to God. I can raise my children right. I can be a good employee, Father. I can be a good servant. Whether I'm serving as just a good husband or wife, whether I'm a shepherd, a minister, a deacon, doesn't make any difference. Perhaps I'm an usher at the door. Doesn't make any difference. Keeping the yards clean. Doesn't make any difference. The mere fact that we heal, that we need healing, we cannot allow it to be impaired by denial. We can't allow it to be impaired by not recognizing it, by not responding to it, and by not being renewed. I hope that David has given us some insight into how a man heals, how he should heal, the reason why he needs to heal, the appropriate way of healing. I believe David covers it. David is not fault-finding. He's fact-finding. He's not giving excuses, but there are reasons. He gives those reasons. I hope that what's being said will just actually cause you to think about where you are. Cause you to think about what you are doing in life, where you are in life. Hopefully it will cause you to want to be a better servant. Hopefully we connected with David. David, a man after God's own heart, in a very powerful way. A way that can bring about changes in our own personal life. I want to thank you for your time, for your attention. Hopefully you're enjoying the lectureship. And hopefully there are things that's being said in all of these sessions that will help you and that you can benefit from. May God bless you. May God keep you. Thank you so very much.
Every day, every single day of our life. Oh Lord.
Thank you for being with us this afternoon for the workshops and then the culminating message, Deity's Dependability in Dim Days. I believe that you have been enriched. We're thankful that you have tuned in. And we look forward to you being with us again on this evening as we will have two dynamic messages from the Word of God that will further encourage us under our theme, Help, Healing for Everyday Life's Problems. May God bless you.
Every day, every single day of our life.